episode of In Other Words with Danielle and Zara.
So this is a podcast where we talk about a wide variety of different subjects, from body image to pornography. So in other words, we talk about all the things.
So today we are tackling a rather serious topic versus a lot of what we've done in the past. And we're going to be talking about death, specifically like what happens after death, thoughts on euthanasia and suicide and the death penalty. So yeah, it's definitely going to be an interesting episode.
Yes. So before we get into it, we just want to put a bit of a trigger warning, because there is going to be mention of suicide and like sensitive topics like that. So if you find that you are sensitive towards things like that, or if you're battling with suicidal thoughts, it might be better if you don't listen to it. But in any case, we have a suicide hotline number for you, and that is 0800 567 567, as listed under the South African group of depression and anxiety, I think. Something like that. You can look it up.
Yes. So, yeah, I think to start us off, should we maybe just speak about our opinions on death? A lot of people actually will ask, like, are you afraid of death? So
Yes.
I think that would be my question to you.
Yeah.
And then what is after this life?
Cool. So that is actually one of the questions that we got. We did ask on our personal stories and also on our podcast story on Instagram. If you're not following, it's In Other Words _ podcast. So go check us out on Instagram so you can interact. So yeah, someone asked if we are scared of death. I personally, I don't think I wouldn't say that I'm scared of death, actually. And both of us are Christians, so we believe that if you accept the Lord Jesus into your heart and you follow him and you have a relationship with him, that you will go to heaven. That is the Christian way of thought, and that is what I believe. I do have a lot of peace with that in my heart. So yeah, I probably, when I was younger, like, I used to feel kind of scared, just because like you didn't really have a proper, I mean, I was raised in a Christian household, so I've always like known like, oh, like if you're a Christian you can go to heaven or whatever. But I could never really like sat properly until probably when I was 13 or 14. Then I was like, okay, so this is actually what it means. And I haven't really been scared of death. I think what scares me about death is just that, like, you're leaving people behind to suffer, which sucks, obviously. But as for myself, I'm not like terrified. And you?
I think for me, just going back to like growing up, I think I've always been very fascinated with death. It's something that I did think about as a child, not like morbidly, but it's definitely something I thought about. And obviously, since becoming a Christian, you've spoken about like what we believe, and again, I also have a lot of peace about that. I always say, like, I think we'll be very surprised at who we see in heaven, because we don't know people's hearts.
That's true.
And so, yeah, the super uber religious people, make sure your heart is right with God and you're not just
following the laws.
But yeah, I also have like a lot of peace. Heaven is like something I really look forward to. Like
do you just want to like go into maybe like what the Christian idea of heaven is? Because I feel like, I mean, there's obviously been lots of different representations, like in the media. I don't know if you've ever seen The Good Place, but
I haven't, but I've heard of it.
It's wonderful. But yeah, what do you believe heaven will be like?
Okay, so it's not something that I've done too much research on, and it was an elective course that I didn't take. I know.
You could have prepared so much for this episode.
No. And everyone's always like, either you're living in the clouds, or they're pearly gates and everything's gold, which we've established will not do well for your eyes, Danielle. So to be honest, there's not much that I know, but I do know that it's when we will be in the presence of God fully, like nothing over our eyes, like we will be in the presence of God, and in that we will find like joy. And I know that heaven is a place, it speaks about how heaven is a place with no more tears, no more suffering. So I understand the nature of heaven more so than the physical idea of heaven. I also, it speaks about the second coming of Jesus when he comes again. The Lord will bring a new heaven and a new earth, and creation will be restored. So if we look at the original creation, it was the Garden of Eden. It was the animals, it was the plants, it was etc etc. I don't know if we'll be naked in heaven, because that's how we were,
or we'll even have a body at all.
We will have resurrection bodies.
True.
About that.
Will it be like a human body though?
We don't know. So it'll be interesting, but I definitely think that it's creation at its best and at its most perfect. So I think there'll be lots of greenery, which sounds legit to me. And I don't know if there'll be cockroaches, probably, but I hope not.
Hopefully not.
But so that's,
I've always held the idea that bugs like mosquitoes or cockroaches only came onto the earth after the fall of mankind. That's just my opinion. But I have like the same thoughts as you about heaven. No idea like what that kind of thing will look like, but in terms of the Christian vision of heaven, it's more about going and being with God and going to worship God. So as blunt as it might sound, like I feel like often people like might get upset if they think that Christians don't think that they will go to heaven. But the like matter of fact is, if you're not worshipping God on earth, why would you want to do it for eternity?
And that's the thing. I think in my reading of this, I read a quote that's like, no one goes to hell unwillingly. Do you know what I mean? Like, you make distinctive choices in your life, and it's not at all based on like morality or this like, I did enough good things in my life to go to heaven, or I did many bad things to go to hell. It's not about that at all. It's just about like your relationship with the Lord. And I think you're either choosing God or you're not choosing God. That's essentially what it comes down to. And I think to not be in heaven is to not be in the presence of God. So
that leads to another question that we got asked. Do you think that there is a choice after we die?
So again, this is not something that the Bible particularly discusses, well, not from like my offhand knowledge. I know, like, I've never read anything where there's like some sort of purgatory or like some kind of in between. I know when we die we will like see God face to face. So I don't know, but I think a lot of people fear, it's like a lot of people will ask like, what if someone never had the opportunity to meet God, or to meet like the Son of God, Jesus? Like, how is that fair? Or like, do babies just go to hell because they didn't make that choice? And I truly believe that God will judge each and every single person according to their own understanding, and it comes down to the heart. So, and I don't believe, if God created every person in his image, it says he knit us together in like our mother's womb, he knows the hairs on our head. I don't believe God would create and have unconditional love for that which he intended to completely like destroy. So for me, I think there's a choice that we make in our hearts, whether we realize it or not. But I'm also a firm believer that like God can speak to you on your deathbed. Like, we don't know the level of consciousness. There's a lot that's happening in our heart and our spirit that like is not necessary right now in the physical you can see. And so I don't believe it's like you get to like the gates of heaven and here's God and it's like, okay, now I get to choose. I think it's, you make an active choice in your heart, in your spirit, like beforehand. And your thoughts?
I mean, I was speaking with my parents like before we filmed this, because I don't know, like I was just thinking basically like what about those people who literally never get a chance to meet Jesus, or like actual children who maybe can't, like, who weren't raised in a Christian household, or like were never really introduced to Jesus, or actually can't comprehend giving your life to Jesus like that. Like, would they automatically go to hell? And then that also just raises the question of like, how fair would hell be if you have to spend eternity in hell for a few years on earth, you know? But I would like to believe that the Lord has ways of revealing himself. I mean, I don't know so much like if after you die, if you can still make that decision, like
I mean, I've
never been there. I have no idea.
What?
Can you believe it?
You've never died.
I know, like, despite the dead look on my face most of the time, I'm still alive. But yeah, it was quite an interesting question. But yeah.
I think it all comes down. I find a lot of peace in knowing the nature of God and who He is. So yeah, I just have a lot of peace, and there's a lot of things that I'd like to know, but I'm okay not knowing.
Yeah. No, I am in the same boat.
I would love to die in my sleep.
Yes.
Peacefully.
You're listening, God. But yeah. Okay. So now we also asked on our story, like, if anyone has any theories, what happens. Unfortunately, we didn't get a lot of answers. But anyway.
Maybe people were scared.
I did like one that we got though. It says that when you die, you take off your virtual reality glasses or whatever, and you say that was a wild ride. So my question is, what are the logistics?
I also want to know.
Are there infinite realities, and then each time you in that reality dies, you take off the virtual reality glasses?
How many of these glasses are there?
Yeah, what happens? Or is there a creator, or are we just there eternally? I don't know.
These are the questions.
That's what I would like to know. And then someone else said they just don't think about it.
Yes.
Which is cool.
Yes, a lot of people believe YOLO.
Yeah.
YOLO. Live once, and then that's that. You're in the ground.
Yeah.
Some people believe in reincarnation, which essentially means that you die and you come back.
And it's also related to karma, I think. Like, if you have good karma, then you'll come back as like something good. Yes. But if you have bad karma,
you'll come back as a cockroach. So
watch out, Zara.
No. Yeah. So I think there are a lot of different theories.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's very interesting.
What we know for sure is that, like, death is difficult. Being left behind is difficult.
Yes.
But yeah. And I have a question for you. This is kind of related to what we were speaking about earlier.
Okay.
But it's kind of, I mean, maybe not new, but it's a thought that's become, like, more common, especially, like, with theologians.
Yes.
Is that hell doesn't actually exist.
Ooh.
What do you think about that? They say, like, the idea of hell is so unlike God in the sense that He is loving and fair, that you'd have to spend eternity for a few years on earth, if you know what I mean. So what do you think about that?
Well, the issue is that the Bible is very, very clear that hell does exist.
Yeah.
And I mean, at the end, it speaks about just this fiery pit.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, if you are Christian and you believe in the presence of Satan, God speaks about how He is irredeemable. Yeah. So there would need to be a place for Satan to be. And then again, for those who don't choose Him. And here's the thing, okay. We don't deny the wrath of God and how He's righteous in His judgment just because He created everything. The issue with saying, like, God is so loving, how could He let anyone go to hell? It again comes down to people choose. Like you will choose. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? Like, no one is, I don't believe that someone's going to get to heaven and going to be like gobsmacked and be like, oh, I don't know. And God's like, peace out. Yeah. But the issue is there's just too much scripture where it speaks about hell for there not to be hell. Yeah. There's a very good book. Rob Bell wrote a book called Love Wins, and it was all about how everyone goes to heaven, and that's not what I believe. And so, like, I had to do an assignment in a similar line, and I was reading it, and my issue was, like, he put scripture in like 3 times in the whole book.
Oh, hectic.
It was a Christian book.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like, I mean, it's got beautiful principles, and I don't want to, like, knock the guy.
Yeah.
But then someone published a book in response to his book called now I can't remember. God is good. Oh no, God wins. Sorry, God wins. So there's Love Wins and God Wins. So if it's something,
it's a rough, like, smack back, like, ooh.
Yeah. But I mean, if you're gonna write a book like that, you're opening yourself up to it.
Yeah, 100%.
If we have a podcast, we open ourselves up to these things.
Unfortunately.
So I think for people who have those questions, it would be very good to actually read both books alongside each other.
Cool.
So, yep.
Yeah, I'll like show you some of the things that I was reading earlier. Because I was like, what is it that people actually believe? And I understand. Like, I genuinely understand, like, the thought behind it.
Yeah.
But yeah, you can't, like, deny what it says in scripture.
No.
But anyway.
But I also find a lot of peace in knowing that I'm not God and I'm not the all-knowing.
Exactly.
And
very happy about that.
I could be wrong. I could get to heaven and be wrong about so many things.
Exactly. That's the thing. We as humans, like, we know nothing.
Yes.
I wish we could just communicate with someone.
Just Google it.
True.
It's like a God Google. Be nice.
So should we go on to
euthanasia? Yes. Do you want to kick us off?
Okay.
What is euthanasia?
Euthanasia is essentially, well, they also call it assisted suicide, or it's also like, I suppose it's almost like a mercy killing as well. Yeah. So typically it's when like someone is very ill, like often terminally ill, and they can choose to ask the doctor to give them a lethal dosage of something, and then they can pass away peacefully. I think the main idea of it is to die with dignity rather than to carry on suffering. It's illegal in many countries. Like, I think it's legal in most places, actually.
Which of the countries where it is legal?
I think it's legal in Switzerland.
And the Netherlands?
The Netherlands. It's legal in Belgium, I think.
I think there were like 3 countries, but guys, Google it, let us know.
Yeah, it's like Sweden or Switzerland. It's legal in one of those places. I remember reading about it in that book, Me Before You. But yeah, I think, like, on my opinions on euthanasia, I don't actually have like a strong opinion on like whether it's right or wrong, because I think, like, I was genuinely just reading up on like the pros and cons about it today, and like both sides make complete sense to me, if you know what I mean. So like, on one hand, I think I love the idea, well, not love the idea, but I like the idea that if someone is suffering for so long, that they can decide, listen here, doctor, like, please just help me to like relieve this pain. I don't want to be on earth anymore. But on the other hand, I think it can open up like many doors that are quite dangerous, like let's say eugenics, you know, the idea that like if you're handicapped or you don't have the mental capacity to do something that you don't need to be on the earth, that you can decide to die, if you know what I mean. Or even the fact that people might be pressurized to choose euthanasia, which is a bit scary to me. You know, like family members might say, listen, like, time for you to go. Or even, I even saw there was a thing with like health policy that they can also choose, like, influence people to become euthanized rather than pay out like their
life insurance,
not even life insurance, but also just the medical bills, which is also a thing on its by itself. But yeah, I think if there were like very strict guidelines, then it could work. But I don't know, I've never been in like the position to want to die like that. But anyway, what do you think?
So it is difficult, but like fundamentally it always for me comes down to 2 things. First of all, the value of human life, and just as humans, our inability to handle the weight and responsibility of another's life. And so I think the doctors that are certified to euthanize, I think that's a huge responsibility.
No, it is,
to put
definitely.
on your hands. And I don't know how you handle that both professionally and emotionally. And in one breath, I've heard people say, like, it's your life. Surely you have the right. But then I ask, can you say that to those who've committed suicide? Will you say, like, you know what, they committed suicide, but it was their life, so do you see why? Like, yes, the circumstances are very, very different, but the argument applies to both. I think, I don't know, I was speaking, I think one of my family members, but they had like watched a documentary about euthanasia, and previously they were quite anti
euthanasia, like just the idea that it goes against like Christianity and you're trying to play God or whatever. But they sent me a voice note, and just one of the things they said, like, that they've almost realized is that with suicide, it's people who don't want to live anymore, but with euthanasia, it's people who want to live but can't. So like, I don't know how like it rings true to like every single person, but I suppose that's like maybe one way of looking at it. But
I think also, if I have to take this, like, because it's easy to say when you've never been in the situation, but like I look at my gran, for example, and like we thought she was going to pass away like in July when she was in the hospital, but then she came home and she only passed away in October.
Hectic.
And literally it got to the point where she could no longer eat, she couldn't speak, she couldn't open her eyes, like she was wearing nappies, like it was like the single most difficult thing I've ever had to see.
I can imagine.
And it's something I wrestled with God with. Like I didn't understand why prolong the suffering, you know, like what, like why, like can't you just leave this earth? Like this person who's looked after everyone her whole life now can't do anything for herself, and she was a very independent woman, but in hindsight I look at it and I'm like, I don't know how I would feel if that decision were made by healthcare professionals to take her life. And I don't know how that would have changed people's grieving. So
it would have been difficult either way.
So those are my feelings. I don't know how you feel about people signing a DNR, which is a do not resuscitate form. So it's basically like,
I'll tell you straight out that I would not want to be resuscitated.
I'm exactly the same. I feel like
I really don't want to
outside of machines.
But then I suppose it can be then applied to the same thing as euthanasia, like if you're keeping someone alive with medication.
No, exactly. Like, I mean, it was the same.
They would,
she was on no meds at the end.
Like they're gonna die anyway, so might as well.
But
like I said, if it is to be legal, there must be a lot of guidelines in place to protect people, and also to protect doctors.
Big time.
Because obviously doctors should never be forced to do anything like that, just in my opinion. I think most people would agree with that. But
we're interested to know your thoughts.
So let us know. Send us a message, a DM.
Yes.
Cool.
And then suicide. I think firstly, I would say like there's always a way out. Like there's always help available. Like, it never is the only the last resort, you know? So I think that's important for people to know, and it's easy to say to someone like if they're in their worst state of mind, like there's help when they don't feel like it. But I think that's the first point I want to get across, is there's always help, there's always another option.
And please reach out to anyone if you're feeling like that.
But what are your thoughts around like suicide and death, etc.? Because something I found, and it's actually a question I had, is a lot of people, like Christians specifically, have said that like people who commit suicide go to hell.
I don't really agree with that, just because I've seen people who have been Christians their entire lives, like literally dedicate their lives to the Lord, who still battle a lot with like depression and anxiety, whatever, and who do end up committing suicide. And I can't see how it is that one decision can derail everything that you've done your whole life, if you know what I mean. And I think that ultimately comes down to God knowing your heart, which is what we've already spoken about. And that's what I would hold with anything. If someone asks me, do you think these people will go to hell because of that, I'll be like, listen here, I'm not God. So I don't think it's right to say that if you commit suicide that you're going to go to hell, because that logically just doesn't make sense to me. But my thoughts on suicide as a whole, I don't know, I don't have like a bunch of thoughts surrounding it, except that I think it's a difficult decision to make, like as if you're in like a sound state of mind. I think it often comes down to just being in a really, really dark place. So yeah, I don't know, what do you have to say?
So I definitely, again, there's absolutely nothing that says that like people who commit suicide go to hell. A lot of people will be like, but they didn't have time to like
trust
repent
God
before.
Yeah.
And I mean, if you lie and then you're in a car crash, does that mean you're going to hell?
Exactly.
And also it's not about trusting God. We all falter
exactly
in our faith.
And if you generally are like mentally ill, or if you have a mental disorder, like it's very difficult to think clearly.
Yes.
And like something that you would normally know is something that you would not normally know in that kind of situation.
Exactly. And so that's something that I want to get like across, because I've done a lot of reading on it, is a person, like we always say it, like mental illness is exactly the same as physical illness, but we don't treat it the same. And at the end of the day, like no one in their right sound mind would take their own life.
Exactly. It goes against our biological traits.
Exactly. The reason why we breathe, the reason why we feed ourselves daily is we have this instinct to preserve our own life.
Exactly.
No matter how angry we are at ourselves or, you know.
Yeah.
So when you are in like this physically, like your brain is in a state of like you cannot think clearly or soundly.
Yeah.
That is the only point in which you will reach where you my life is worth nothing anymore kind of thing. And I also I've heard a lot of people, and this is just something I wanted to say, is I've heard a lot of people say like it's a very selfish decision to make.
Yeah. What do you think about that?
So it's easy to see it as a selfish decision.
Yeah.
Because everyone's like, not everyone, but I think a lot of people who have been in that position will say I just thought like people would be better off without me. But the reality is that no one will be truly better off. Like there will always be people who miss you. There will always be people who carry some emotional weight.
But that also that kind of thought also is just heavily linked to like mental issues.
So again, I think it's like, don't ever think that someone's killing themselves to spite you.
Yeah.
They, again, were not in their right mind. And then also something, however, that I do also really want to get across, the whole idea of like 13 reasons why.
I was literally just about to ask you that.
Something that I struggle with, and I didn't watch it, so
I watched the first season. I really didn't enjoy it. I also read the book. The book was a bit better, but I didn't like the whole concept.
So as far as I know, she commits suicide and then she records tapes.
Yeah, she leaves 13 tapes to 13 different people about
why they were
part of the reason that she committed suicide.
Yes. And for me, like, that does not sit well with me at all.
No, me neither.
Because no one can be responsible
for your own choices.
Yes. And no one else can be responsible for someone else's life.
Exactly. And putting that pressure on someone is ridiculous.
Exactly. So I think if you've ever had anyone in your life that has committed suicide, it can never be on your shoulders or your responsibility.
Yeah.
And you were not ever meant to carry that guilt.
Exactly.
That doesn't mean like treat people like crap.
Yeah. Always be nice to people. I think that's probably what the show was trying to like get across. Like, oh, be careful how you treat people. I
just like, for me, I don't know, it wasn't cool, and it was like also like romanticized the whole idea of suicide a little bit for me. But I think we'll get into that when we chat about mental health.
Yeah, I was just about to say that because I think we both have a lot of thoughts on the thingy, and also it's a money grab. But anyway.
Okay, and then
the death penalty.
Suicide, that's enough.
Yeah.
The death penalty.
Okay. Personally, I am not pro death penalty in the slightest. Mostly because, once again, I don't think that it's right for someone to take that kind of responsibility into their own hands to kill someone who does actually have the capability to make changes in their own life. You know what I mean? And a lot of people might get angry and say like, no, but like if someone's a rapist or someone murdered my daughter or son or whatever, then they must die.
Yeah.
But like as a Christian, I can't really condone that. And also
as a human being, I think.
Yeah, as a human being, like, yeah, like an eye for an eye, like that doesn't make the world go round, you know? No. One thing that always bugs me is that a lot of people who are pro-life in the sense of don't wanting abortions are
also
pro-death penalty. It's never really made sense to me because I'm like,
it doesn't make sense.
Those things don't, like, they don't go.
Also, abortion, by the way, we did chat about it.
Yeah.
If you're wondering why we're not chatting about it now, we did it in another episode.
I think that was our 3rd episode.
Yeah,
it's called Let's Talk About Sex, baby.
Yes. So I actually want to read something. Check out prepared I am.
Wow. She is a scholar of note.
Oh, you know. So it's a snippet from The Sun Does Shine by Anthony Ray Hinton and Laura Love Harden.
Yeah.
And it's basically about this guy. He was on death row, and now he tells the story of a friend of his who was killed. A friend, I say friend, but they became friends on death row.
Hectic.
And this guy was Henry Hayes. And if you Google him, you'll read up on him. But he lynched a boy because the boy was black.
That's hectic.
No other reason other than the fact that he was black. So immediately in me, that stirs up like a lot of anger.
Oh yeah.
And a lot of hurt. Yes. A lot of emotion. And here, this guy that's written this book, he is in jail because he's black. Like, he's been put on death row for murder for two crimes he didn't commit because he's black. Yeah. That's the only reason. So the likelihood of these two people being
friends
in the same place is just wild. But this is what he writes. So it says, at a few minutes before midnight on June 5th, I stood at the door of my cell. I took off my shoe and I started banging on the bars and wire. I wanted Henry to hear me. I wanted him to know he wasn't alone. I knew when they shaved his head and heard when the generator kicked on. I banged louder, as did every guy up and down our tier and every tier. We banged our bars for Henry Hayes. Black, white, it didn't matter. I knew he was scared. I knew he was alone. I knew that he was afraid that hell waited on the other side of death row because of what he had done. We banged and we yelled and we hollered as loud as we could. For 15 minutes, I screamed until my throat was raw and hoarse. I screamed so Henry would know that he meant something. I screamed so that whoever was there to watch the state of Alabama kill in their name knew what were real. Knew. Reading skills, Zara. Let's go back. Knew that we were real men and that you couldn't hide us under a black hood and pretend we didn't feel pain. I screamed because I knew that innocent men had been strapped in that horrid yellow chair, their heads shaved like a bad dog, their dignity stripped away little by little, their worth as humans tied up with electric wires and thrown away like garbage. Innocent men had died in that chair. Guilty men had died in that chair. Strong men had wept like babies, and weak men had held steady as they met their deaths. I yelled for Henry so he would hear me and so he would know that he didn't have to meet his maker alone, and that whoever stared at him in that death chamber with cold eyes was no match against the heat of our cries. We screamed in protest, and we screamed in unity, and we screamed because there are times when screaming is all there's left to do. And like,
hectic.
When I first read this, like, it actually, like, even like reading it now, it like makes me a little bit emotional. Just because, like, what is the likelihood that these two people would become friends and that there would be this sense of camaraderie on death row? And it's not like Henry did, if you read his story, he did realize like what he'd done was wrong. He'd grown up in that mindset of black people are terrible. But it's not like he did anything amazing to change the world, but like his life was still of worth. And every human life has worth, and I truly believe that like people can change. And I don't think that's an ignorant or a silly thought to have. And so again, I would say like I don't believe that we as humans have the right to take someone else's life into our hands, regardless of what they've done. And again, like, someone is gonna have to stand before God one day, and if they've hurt you or done like unspeakable things, like, they're gonna have to face the Creator.
Exactly.
And and I don't believe that it's our responsibility, and I really believe that like there's worth in human life regardless of the life.
Yeah, I think also one of my biggest issues with the death penalty is the fact that like how the judiciary and just like the prison systems as a whole in so many countries are completely messed up and so corrupt as well.
Big time.
And the fact that so many people are wrongfully imprisoned and wrongfully put on death row, I think that's just complete nonsense. That they will then have that you can sentence someone to death for something that they haven't even done. And obviously I'm not saying that if someone has done something then they deserve to die, but just the idea that people are wrongfully accused all the time. And I remember that's okay, in 2019 when they were in South Africa, when there was a lot of protests against gender-based violence, a lot of people were calling for the death penalty. And I was like, listen, like, I understand your pain as a woman in South Africa, I understand, but do you really want to trust our police to like do those kinds of things and to imprison those kinds of people when we know that they are so corrupt? We know that so many systems in our government are so corrupt. I just don't think it's a wise thing to do, you know. But yeah, I think for me a much better alternative would be to improve prisons as a whole.
That's the thing, it should be a corrective form of punishment.
Like a rehabilitation as well.
Exactly. I'm not saying that like
they should never be punished. I think people absolutely need to atone for what they've done. Atone, that's such a fancy word. Wow. But but those are thoughts. Please, if you disagree, like we're not gonna like be like you're wrong. And I mean, we haven't had like a chance to fully get into every single thing.
Exactly.
Because we try to keep our episodes
so
fairly short,
so
if you could believe it.
Run out of excitement. We like to leave you wanting more.
Exactly. So I think that's all we have to say.
Yes.
And what we did want to add is that if you have any local brands, if you're South African, you have local brands that you'd like us to check out so we can actually promote them, then please drop us a message.
Yes, and we want to go all local and only buy local one day.
Exactly, that would be the main goal.
Let us know.
Yeah, and also, which one of our three do we want to shout out today?
You know what? Let's give a shout out to Graphic Studios. Go follow them on Instagram. They do all of the fun production elements of our podcast.
Indeed.
And they make it possible for us to just sit and speak.
Exactly, and that's graphic with a K.
Indeed. Thank you so much, guys, and I'm excited to see you all next time.
Bye.